Yeah, there's lots of these. Fake anime games, or a little less inflammatory, Western-made games that have a Japanese anime influence. Back in the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, there was a very clear-cut difference between Eastern and Western cartoon animation styles. There's more subtle things like the differences in budgets, the way characters' feelings are expressed, and the passage of time, what with Frieza's 5 minutes. But the most obvious thing is the style. No one's out there thinking Inspector Gadget was Japanese anime. It's this stark contrast that made American animation blocks like Toonami stand out so much. Not only was it blatantly themed as such, but you'd finish an episode of Dexter's Lab and then hop right into Outlaw Star or Tenchi Muyo. Whiplash? Absolutely, but it was cool at the time. Traditionally, Western shows are more lighthearted and focused more on teaching the kids a good lesson about life or stopping all the downloading. Or you could pop on something like Zeta Gundam and watch 50 episodes of one of the most gut-wrenching and depressing space soap operas out there. Kids show, am I right? Well, at a certain point, the popularity of anime couldn't be denied any longer, and Western studios, be it through corporate oversight or sheer passion for the medium, decided, hey, I am very influenced, and I'm very thankful. It's because of you that we got shows like Megas XLR, Totally Spies, Teen Titans, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and more modern takes like Ruby and She-Ra. There's a lot of history here, and you could honestly go on forever, but I'm a video game guy, so video games. In 2022, with all of the internet and gaming cultures melting together with a mishmash of styles, a video game's place of origin is a lot of the time totally indiscernible. Like, for example, I've been playing Anno Mutationum and Gunfire Reborn, two totally different looking things both from China. But the thing that intrigues me the most are the, how to put it frankly, how to draw manga style. And boy, strap in, because I found a lot.
So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be talking about fake anime video games. I hope you like looking at the video game equivalent of a bootleg anime figure, because some of these are pretty over the top. I'd also be surprised if you've heard of more than like 2 or 3 of these, because I had to dig deep. Like, really deep. But before we get started today, we need to take a quick bite with today's sponsor, once again, Factor. Food, yes. When it comes to eating, especially lately as I've been working on all these videos, I've been having a hard time finding myself the time to sit down and cook something healthy. It doesn't help that I'm bad at it. So I've been using Factor for fast and healthy pre-prepared meals that come in a delivery kit straight to your door. Toss out the garbage and go low calorie, keto, vegan, or vegetarian. Each week you've got a list of highly customizable options to choose from that can be made as easily as tossing it into the microwave. Bonus points if you played it nicely. Factor's been on the channel here before, but this week they sent me the Santa Fe green chili beef skillet, and this thing freaking owns. But I've also become a fan of their plant-based smoothies lately. Finally, any gamer bod can get the nutrition it deserves. Factor is all about getting wholesome eating choices for the person on the go like me, or in a lot of cases, probably some of y'all. Factor is now also owned by HelloFresh, so between the two and some of the codes that I have on this channel, you can be eating nicely. So if you want to start eating more healthy or just need something to help support a busier lifestyle, head to go.factor75.com/Eruption130 and use the code Eruption130 for $130 off your first purchase. Thanks to Factor for the sponsor, but now we have to go back to where no one wants to go, in the back of my mind, where I used to draw anime all the time. In a case of it takes one to know one, yeah, I could tell me some fake anime when I saw it, and I can actually remember the first time I remember seeing it. The very first time I saw Shantae, I legit thought this was a Japanese-made game. I mean, it was even published by Capcom. But no, this was developed by California-based Way Forward, who, to be fair, have worked with several Japanese publishers over the years. But only Shantae got that booty wiggle. There was also Artix Entertainment's Adventure Quest, the browser-based Flash RPG where you'd make a character and go on, well, an adventure quest. Prior to having access to MMOs like WoW, RuneScape, or Final Fantasy XI, I played this as an eager 12-year-old child after school. It's changed quite a bit since then, considering they're still rolling after 20 years, but one look at any of the created characters in this game and it's very evident that someone's a fan of DBZ. The game looks a little different these days, but I'll never forget the town of Babylon. Also, somehow this has spawned multiple sequels and spin-offs that all do the same kind of shtick. I'm sure there's at least one Adventure Quest 3D superfan out there. I hope you're having a good day. These browser-based games were pretty big back in the day. It's much less so now, but both Neopets
Neopets and Gaia Online kind of existed in the same headspace. Somehow Gaia Online is still around. This is much less of a game and more of an interactive chat room, but if you've ever met a late 20s or early 30s something internet person, they probably have some experience with it. Though I have to say, I don't think Zoomers are big on the fun online hangout for teens and young adults. They've got Gmod Dark RP for that. But the first fake anime game I remember seeing, and one that's never left my brain, is Magination for the Game Boy Color. One look at that box, and you knew. But what the heck is Magination? Well, it's a lot of things, but most importantly, it's the story of Tony Jones. The coolest kid this side of town with his bright red hoodie, khaki cargos, and wallet chain. I distinctly remember seeing ads and posters for this thing all up in like Nintendo Power and Electronic Gaming Monthly, but I was never really sure what it was. It turns out Magination was an attempt at making a new collectible card game, but one with a very specific purpose. The developers, Interactive Imagination, wanted to make a gateway card game between Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. That's literally it. They wanted to fill the gap. Thus, Magination Duel was born. It's very out of print at this point, having only 4 expansions and stopping production in 2002, but it was packed with that anime-inspired art style. Some of these cards were pretty ridiculous looking, but I did like the back card art. It's very fancy. In 2001, wanting to grow their audience, they released that Game Boy Color game, packed it with a narrative about good old Tony Jones being isekai'd into another world and learning to use the power of various monsters like the Furok or a freaking Weebo. A Weebo. The dialogue in this game is like ridiculous. When you first start, there's these kids like talking who are clearly friends, and then Tony Jones rolls up like he's also their friends. He's like, "What up, fellas?" And they're like, who is this guy? Then you meet the tutorial guy, Yaki, who talks exclusively like Macho Man. "Ooh yeah, how you doing, brother?" The game itself is a very basic RPG card game hybrid that has leveling mechanics, so it's not quite what the card game is, but more of a like, I don't know, introduction to the world. It goes a little more Pokemon than card game, but I guess that works as a video game. There's a huge difference between the art styles of monsters and even characters. Sometimes things look a little Western, and sometimes things look like this. Magination reeks of anime fan. You know, as far as card game RPGs on the portable go, you can do a lot worse than this, and Magination seems to have done decently well with reviewers at the time. The gameplay itself is pretty slow and uninteresting, especially in 2022, but it's passable. But for whatever reason, the whole franchise didn't really seem to take off, and this is all that we would get in the States. I say in the States because for some reason, this got a Japanese-only remake. 1 year later, Magination for the Game Boy Advance, developed by the same people, but Japanese only. Rather than Tony Jones, you play as a kid named Dan. It goes through the same story and everything, but now you're Dan. The battle system is quite a bit improved, and it's basically just a better time overall, but for whatever reason, this didn't make it over here, despite being developed over here. You think that'd be the end of Magination, but no, the rabbit hole keeps going, because in 2007, there was a Kids WB cartoon for this thing. One that took TJ and made him into a brunette for reasons probably pertaining to research and development. This thing got canceled in its second season with 12 unaired episodes being YouTube only, so yeah. Props to the devs for trying to keep Magination alive for so long. May the legend of Tony Jones live on.
Magination was the first game that I remember with this shtick, but it does go back a lot further. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I did a lot of research, and the first thing that I could find, like the earliest example, was a little Amiga game called Apidia.
1992. That's one heck of a cover, I know. After digging for way too long to find stuff, I stumbled upon a weird game called Apidia. We usually don't get into Amiga stuff on this channel because, straight up, I'm just unfamiliar with most of it, but I had to touch on this one. Developed by a German studio called Kaiko, the people behind Mr. Nuts Hoppin' Mad, this actually wasn't their first time doing this. In 1991, they released a puzzle game called Jim X that featured like 3 illustrations of particularly anime-looking women, or whatever you'd call this. But after this, we'd get Apidia. You might notice a 2 on the main menu. Apparently that was just an in-joke. Sure. Wanting to, I guess, tell more of a story, we open with an evil lord sending a bunch of bees to kill a, quote, peace-loving couple. The animation we're met with is incredible. Yeah, few bees just wrecked this girl. Then for some reason, the guy cursing the world here T-poses and turns into a bee. Excuse me? And then it's a Gradius clone? What? Apidia is bizarre, and it's only made more bizarre by its conflicting art styles. You You have these detailed sprites of bugs and plant life that are great looking with the occasional zoom in of Ikaros screaming. Never mind the actually stellar soundtrack done by Chris Hulsbeck, who is famous for several Turrican games and the Great Gianna Sisters. The gameplay itself is exactly what it needed to be, which is weird to say. I can't say I had much hope for this to be good or anything, but it's actually a super competent and even challenging shoot 'em up and still plays well today. It's just a totally ridiculous concept, almost like they designed this insect shooting game and then decided to toss some anime-inspired visuals on top of it. But right when you think the absurdity has shown all of its cards, you get into some of the boss fights and are met with some horrifying imagery. I'm not gonna show the decomposing animals, but I will show you this. Don't know what to say. But hey, after defeating a cursed-looking anime doll, a giant robot, and an Australian-sized bee, you save the day and your previously deceased wife. Good job. This ending cutscene is interesting, but at least now everyone can see how beautiful my wife is. Look at her. She's one of a kind. Just like Alien Terminator for the DOS. This is actually a PC version of a SNES game called Realm, which looks like this. It's just an old run and gun type of shooter, one with the guy sporting a 5 head. But for the PC version, they decided to make the cover have this guy. You zoom in real tight and got some DBZ eyes. Alien Terminator and Realm are practically identical, with the exception of like 2 CG cutscenes where the guy's got that how to draw manga face. And I don't know why they did that, but it is nice to play something that promises 100% gameplay and easy loading.
Those are some of the fake anime origins, but now we gotta move forward to the 90s. If you were ever in a mall, you probably heard of a little store called Suncoast Video, where you could find like VHS tapes of the pioneer dub of Dragon Ball Z, or, you know, a little bit further, and then some H stuff that you probably shouldn't be seeing, but hey, it's just cartoons, am I right? The rising popularity of anime got a hold of several video game publishers, but none more prominent than Monolith Productions. They put out not one, but 2 of these things, and you might have seen them bundled together. That's Septeracore Legacy of the Creator and Shogo Mobile Armor Division. If both of these look familiar, you probably saw that dual jewel case on the shelf at like Office Depot. I know I did. It sure fooled me. For years, I thought Septeracore was like a hidden Japanese RPG gem that somehow made its way to the States, but no, not at all. Septeracore Legacy of the Creator is an anime-inspired Western RPG. It changed developers mid-production and had a lot of the people that worked on the Beavis and Butthead adventure game that Viacom put out that was surprisingly good, but this is like a totally different thing. Septeracore is like What If Fallout, but anime with turn-based party combat, and fully voice acted. As far as like aesthetic, mood, and world building go, they pretty much nail it. You play as Maya, a scavenger who tries her best to protect people in an honestly pretty crappy place. You can tell Septeracore is heavily inspired by Final Fantasy VII, down to the way the CGI cutscenes look, and the fact that Shell is very Midgar. The Warrior of Light? Maybe. There's a bunch of different characters, most of which are ridiculous looking, but charming in their own right. I will say that the concept art for a lot of them looks better than the in-game pre-rendered 3D look they got. Led looks cute in her concept art, but in-game it's like, whoo. I've seen fan art of the characters though, and they have a look for sure. It's just unfortunate that the gameplay hasn't aged well at all. In the PlayStation 1 era of JRPGs, combat was typically pretty slow. Despite Final Fantasy VII having lightning-fast battles, other games from the era took it down a notch. Septeracore's combat takes ages. It is a take on the ATB system from like Final Fantasy, but they fill up so slow, and anytime anyone does anything, it freezes, and it just takes way too long. And it doesn't help that the music itself is kind of stock sounding, which is very uncharacteristic of famed composer Martin O'Donnell. But for this thing to have full CGI cutscenes and nearly 100% voice acting at the time is crazy impressive, especially for, you know, a low-budget PC-only game. This is probably the only time in history when JRPGs and Western RPGs collided though, and the result is really interesting. It's worth a shot if you use some mods and trainers to speed things up a bit, but if you don't, it's gonna drag the entire experience down. Now take that little jewel case and flip it around and you get Shogo Mobile Armor Division. Yeah,
Shogo Mobile Armor Division is bonkers, and it's hard not to love this. You gotta dig this J-pop sounding homage to Evangelion as you watch dudes getting popped left and right. Actually developed by Monolith, Shogo is a first-person shooter that's a story about war. Shocking no one, war is bad. Except in this game, everyone has that signature not anime look. Yep. This crosses more into Uncanny Valley territory too, because it doesn't just have portraits, it tried with the models, and it's horrifying. There's a lot that you can say about the graphics here, too much. The models look ridiculous, some of the textures are plain bad, and some of the designs questionable. The robots look great and everything, and well, we'll get to that. But why is the gun so big? Is this a glitch, I thought? But no, this is apparently intended. Shogo doesn't look great now, and it also didn't look great for the time, although there's a nice variety in the locations. Considering Half-Life 1 was on the horizon a mere month later, you kinda know where this stands. The story's pretty generic. You play as a guy named Sanjuro who has lost everything. Brother, dead. Best friend, dead. Girlfriend, dead. Girlfriend's sister, new girlfriend. Because yeah, you can just date your dead girlfriend's sister whenever they die. Shogo's lead designer, Craig Hubbard, has said that the game fell embarrassingly short of the team's original design goals, which to me is pretty condemning. However, by no means is Shogo a bad game. It's actually pretty highly praised across the board with an 88 on Metacritic. Sure, it's no Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, the best game ever, but this certainly didn't fall on deaf ears. Playing the thing, 22 years later though, it holds up. That is, once you figure out how to make this thing load properly on modern computers. You wanna play this in any resolution beyond 480, you gotta do a lot of tweaking. Shogo is surprisingly humorous and in a way that holds up and isn't Postal 2.
Aren't you forgetting your squad mates?
Actually, I'm ignoring them.
There's lots of quests in the game that have silly dialogue and entire quest chains that can be canceled by simply shooting someone you shouldn't. Gotta retrieve someone's cat? Well, not if you accidentally shoot them, thinking that clicking on them is gonna pick them up, and then accidentally quick save instead of load. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. The gameplay is solid, if a little generic. Any issues I have with it are just being an old boomer shooter at this point, but it's pretty quick and to the point. On foot, Sanjuro is pretty squishy and the game is really hard for no reason, but when you're in one of the mechs, the things get booming. Literally. The guns get more ridiculous and explosive, fights against people in other mechs are fast-paced, and it feels really good. Despite all of that, Shogo didn't sell well at all. PC exclusives were hard to get the word out with, and because of a smaller marketing budget and, like I said, friggin' Half-Life, this one quickly got pushed aside. Maybe it would have done better with, better market distribution, but that wasn't gonna happen with this. Though it boggles the mind that the dual pack with Septeracore is as remembered as it is. Shogo is neat, and it's worth a shot, just like Tron 2.0 and, well, most of the games Monolith put out. Just be prepared to put in a little homework if you buy it off of Steam or GOG. Getting both of these running on modern PCs properly is a pain.
Both Septeracore and Shogo, while cool, never had any big mainstream success. They were hidden PC exclusives at a time when those things were like a dime a dozen. But if we move forward a little bit, and when Toonami was starting to really take over, you'd begin to see bigger and bigger publishers be like, hey, that anime there is getting pretty popular. That is where the how to draw manga style comes into play, but it's not always wacky. Anyone who got a PlayStation, or maybe even just a gaming magazine, probably already knows about Fear Effect.
Just maybe not for the right reasons. Kronos Digital Entertainment's Fear Effect was an interesting game. It takes the tanky-inspired gameplay from something like Resident Evil, tosses it into a very cinematic-heavy experience, and gives us plenty of sexually charged fan service. The main character, Hana, definitely bears a lot of resemblance to Motoko from Ghost in the Shell, almost as if she fused with Lara Croft. Though I don't think either of them shoot guns like this. No better way to increase your accuracy than with a man spread. Fear Effect and its prequel, Retro Helix, are definitely cult hits that embody a Western take on the ever-growing cyberpunk espionage genre that was all over the place in the early 2000s. But it stands out the most for its incredibly advanced visuals and full voice acting. The entire game is 4 discs long, but because of the amount of cutscenes, can be beaten in a few hours. I'll talk more about these in depth one day because there's maybe a remaster happening. It's definitely a little filthy though.
The big one I remember is Bungie's Oni, and yes, that says published by Rockstar. This was a weird time. This actually came out the same year as Halo, and if you can tell, it fits the criteria.
Although this was Bungie West, a separate studio whose first and only game was Oni. This bodes well. Oni was actually the first PC game I bought as a kid, and it was like this holographic box shoved into a corner at a Staples. At the time, I remember being like, man, Dragon Ball's really cool, and then seeing a girl hold 2 guns with another on her back and thinking to myself, is this the most beautiful woman in the world? And well, they tried their best. Oni is the story of Kanoko, a character who's definitely not Motoko, and this game is definitely not just Ghost in the Shell. Although while Ghost in the Shell is known for great animation, Oni has a bit of a discrepancy. Apparently, this, and this are all supposed to be the same character, all in the same minute-long opening cutscene. Also, her hair in the animation is totally different than the cover art, which does its best to look like the in-game model, which looks completely different than the in-game drawings. It's like the art team couldn't decide on one style. Sometimes it looks great, and sometimes we get whatever this is. Although if you're doubting the anime-ness of this, just check out the special attacks.
Double spin kick!
Earthquaker!
Yo, imagine if Master Chief did that. The game itself is okay. I think I have a weird nostalgia for it though, probably because I bought something 11-year-old me probably shouldn't have seen, but also because it has combat that still to this day reminds me of The Matrix. On the PlayStation 2, it chugs quite a bit and it's tough to control, but Oni at its core feels like a PC shooter with some martial arts and flips tossed in. And your moveset's pretty fun. It's just unfortunately surrounded by some uninspired level design and an unoriginal plot. Like seriously, a majority of the levels in this game are huge gray or dark rooms with impossibly large layouts and nothing interesting in sight. It looks the same the entire time, but at its core, it's kind of a boomer shooter. You can click through an entire long play and it'll look the same the entire time. Some of the voice acting is decent, but a lot of it is at ends with the character designs. Like, despite this game having decent animation and some fluid combat, it has these extremely amateurish character portraits that look questionable. I don't think Oni's a bad game by any means, but it's lacking some of the charm that the cover promised. I personally was expecting to hear way more music, especially because they have 5 different composers, including previously mentioned Martin O'Donnell. The majority of the time, it's just silence and footsteps. But when the music does drop, it does go hard. Oni has unfortunately kind of become lost to time, as Bungie very rarely talks about or references it. Maybe one day the newly acquired Sony-owned Bungie will breathe some life into Oni. I doubt it, but the 11-year-old in me is still hoping. She's beautiful.
Next up, development hell. With a rare exception, any game that goes through this ends up not great. From Duke Nukem Forever to Final Fantasy 15, and still to this day Beyond Good and Evil 2. Well, that was the case with my next game, Malice. Oh no, I got Windows Update. No! Ugly. I followed Malice for a while. Originally going to be on the PlayStation 1, Malice was a platformer that was pushed from 1999 all the way to 2004. I remember when it was going to be a PS1 game. I remember when it was going to be an early Xbox title. Developed by Argonaut Games, the group that made freaking Star Fox and Croc, Malice was initially an engine flip of Croc that put you in control of a small girl with huge anime eyes and a giant club. While a bit freaky, it was a cute design that felt at home on the PS1. Well, due to a mix of high ambitions, getting caught up with licensed games and other things, Malice changed a lot. First there was Fox, they walked away, then Microsoft came on board, they walked away, then Sierra decided to publish it, then not anymore. It went from this to this. And yes, they added a tramp stamp. What was once a cute chibi girl in overalls was now a weird, almost creepy, fake anime version of Gwen Stefani and No Doubt. And if that reference is too specific, well, Malice was originally going to star both Gwen and members of No Doubt. They even put out interviews. So come 2004, Malice hits store shelves with its final publisher, Mad Duck Productions, a budget-priced publisher I gotta add, and it comes out to pretty poor reviews, bad sales, was followed up with the way more notorious Catwoman, and that would be the end of Argonaut Games. I know that sounds really harsh, but it was reality. Having played a majority of the game myself, I do have to say, this thing is a total oddity. Visually, it is a complete mess. I feel like there's colors everywhere, and not a lot of good ones. There's weird instances of them trying to make a fake 3D effect that might have looked half decent on a CRT, but rough in any resolution past 480. It just looks blurry. The fake anime main character, Malice, is the only person in this universe that has this look, and she's always glancing to the side. You know, with the name of the game being Malice, I thought they'd go more into something like Alice in Wonderland or Madness Returns. The name itself seems to imply that, but no, all we get is a redhead with a big ol' hammer and a combo system. Actually, no combos, just a heavy and light attack. You do have the ability to use magic, but it's mostly pointless unless against bosses. I can see some instances where they were trying to do some interesting platforming things, but the end result is really what feels like a half-baked idea through and through. With 3D platformers, you want to have some semblance
less of a personality. And despite this cursed character design looking like a sassy troublemaker, she's got the personality of your basic white girl. Also, the game starts with you getting decapitated? I'm having trouble following. Look, all I'm saying is that when the original PS1 prototype footage looks and runs better than the final product released 5 years later, there's an issue. I can't help but feel bad with all the publisher cancellations and delays, but it seems like Malice was a doomed project from the get-go. Seriously, who thought the lower back tat was the way to go? It looks like a phoenix too, to signify Malice's rise from the ashes, and she's got random Japanese on her sleeves? Girl, you're a disaster.
Speaking of a disaster, how about the next generation of consoles? Now, we do need to move slightly over to Hungary so we can talk about XBlades.
I remember when this came out specifically for one reason. The cover. I was working at a game store at the time, and I remember unpacking boxes and seeing like 6 copies of this nearly naked girl staring at me. Keep in mind, this is pre-Sinran Kagura. Our Western gamer brains haven't gotten used to this yet. Though it's not as extreme as the European cover. Whoa. XBlades sucks. I really don't know how else to put that. It's like they saw Devil May Cry and said, hey, I can do that, but really didn't get it. It reeks of Eurojank, and well, that's pretty much exactly what it is. The combat has no weight to it whatsoever, and the lock-on barely works, so anytime you try to do like a melee combo, you just kind of bounce off and swing at the air. There's magic abilities to unlock, but they also don't feel good. It's just no good. Truly, the only notable thing was them making an anime-inspired protagonist named Ayumi, or according to the Steam page, the long-haired beautiful anime. She was showing her bits and bobs from different angles, and the developers were crossing their fingers hoping they could get a better publishing deal for a better game, and they did. Blades of Time, a soft reboot of XBlades a few years later, actually initially published by Konami. Good job, guys. I guess the butt on the box worked. This looks way less Japanese inspired, but it actually does play quite a bit better. You can tell they're two sides of the same coin with a lot of similar stylistic choices between them, but both aren't really worth seeking out. Weirdly, Blades of Time made its way to the Switch of all platforms in 2019, so if you really want to try it, you can.
Both of these were kind of late to the party. By the time the 7th gen of consoles was out, anime was already way more mainstream, and you would see its influences in shows like Avatar or Teen Titans. In the 2000s and 2010s though, grimdark was all the rage, so you started to see all these Western approaches to anime just kind of fade out. However, that wasn't the case with Blade Kitten.
A game I couldn't play. Oh god, I'm gonna be sick. Blade Kitten is a game developed by Chrome Studios, the people that brought us Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, Viva Pinata Party Animals, and 2 of those Elijah Wood Spyros. Wild, I know. This game was one of those midlife cycle Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network games that had an extremely striking look to it visually. When I think of the fake anime, Blade Kitten is one of the first things that comes to mind. But I could only stomach playing this game for about 9 minutes before I had to stop from nausea, and that's only happened with VR before. I'm not that old, I swear. I thought it was just a me thing, but no, this is apparently just a thing. All I'm saying is that when you get yourself a footnote that says, this game is known to cause motion sickness for some people, that maybe you should fix it. The game itself is a pretty lackluster action platformer that loves doing the anime thing, but it's probably most notable for its release cycle. Originally published by Atari and released in 2010, it was a whole 5 years later that Chrome bought the rights back and released a proper Episode 2 DLC. 5 whole years. So hey, good on y'all for having faith in your product, but I literally can't play it. Anytime you get hit, the camera jerks left and right, and yeah, okay, next game.
I've been targeting mostly consoles and PCs, but I'm not gonna let the portable sit this one out, because we gotta talk about the Game Boy Advance and the SP and DS. Mostly.
Only there will we get cool games like Sigma Star Saga. WayForward was and still is no stranger to making cute anime girls for some of their original IPs, and this is no different. Star Saga is a combination shoot-'em-up RPG that dives a little into other genres as well. It's got a nice variety that keeps the game moving while also using some very pretty, although ridiculous sprite art. You've definitely noticed too, because these things take up a third of the screen. Other developers would dive into this style too. You just probably haven't heard of it, like Black Sigil Blade of the Exiled for the Nintendo DS. Coming out all the way in 2009, Black Sigil's inspirations are extremely obvious. You ever played Chrono Trigger? Well, Studio Archcraft certainly did. The character design set up there comfortably with a mid-90s Konami game, and everything from the sprites to the music and the elements of the story scream Super Nintendo JRPG. Unfortunately, it just really likes tons of slow random battles. Not my favorite part of the genre for sure. The weirdest of the bunch that I found though is Scourge Hive. That's Scourge, by the way. While the cover doesn't reveal much at all, the game you get is pretty interesting. Brought to us by the short-lived Orbital Media, Scourge is very similar to your Metroids in at least atmosphere. You're playing as Genosa Arma, a space-traveling female bounty hunter who's hunting down a parasitic alien life form. You ever heard that one? But the gameplay is pretty unique. This thing's a top-down shooter with unlockable weapons, elemental types, and plenty of gadgets to run around with. Unfortunately, like Blade Kitten, it's got a bit of a camera whipping problem, but it wasn't bad enough to send me to the bathroom. Well, at least not without my SP. This also came out on the DS, but for some reason, it's just better on the older hardware. It helps, by the way, that this thing has a really cool and atmospheric soundtrack by Jake Kaufman of Shovel Knight Necrodancer fame. Instead of focusing on exploration, Scourge is a bit more about running and gunning, because the main mechanic is, well, trying to not get infected. There's a meter on the top of the screen that fills up, so it creates a sense of panic as you play. It's not quite Metroid Dread, but it's not Animal Crossing either. Scourge Hive is a really cool game, but one that unfortunately went under the radar. However, one look at her vaguely anime profile picture that's 3 shades of Cortana, and you'll be sold. Just like Orbital's other fake anime looking game, Juka and the Monophonic Menace, a game whose trailer on IGN has 290 views. Apparently this one is alright. For a younger audience, of course, but I haven't been able to get this kid's face out of my mind since the first time I saw it. It looks like he's trying to sell me drugs. For real.
What about now? It is not uncommon at all to see a game with an anime influenced style from any country. It's all over the place. All the cultures and art styles of video games and, animation mediums have become so homogenized that it's like you can't even really tell where things are from anymore. You're definitely seeing a lot more crossover.
Literally 2 days after I started writing this video, Apex Legends did that Gaiden event that, well, was exactly what I was looking for. In the cutscene, it had that high concept action of Japanese fight scenes, but with that goofy feeling that's just slightly uncanny. A good example of that is 100 Foot Robot Golf, a game that immediately grabbed me the second it came out. You're combining a love for the 80s and 90s mecha animes with absurdist comedy, the rambling commentary of the McElroy brothers, and, well, golf. Maybe not golf, I'm not sure. Look, when the Steam page says that it has some of the cheapest 90s inspired mecha animation ever committed to screen, you know what you're getting. Each pilot is a parody of a different anime series, and you got one that's a set of corgis doing a Voltron thing. What's not to like? There's also Might and Magic Clash of Heroes, one of the most bizarre versions of this. Some of y'all might know the old school games. One of the first PC games I ever played was a copy of Heroes of Might and Magic 2 that I got at a neighbor's garage sale, and so to me, that series is like hardcore medieval fantasy RPG. Little did I know that was a spin-off, and so was Clash of Heroes. How this turned into this, I'll never know, but I'll never hate on a match 3, even if it looks like Adventure Quest. One of the most obvious recent ones is Valhalla, a game I legit thought was a Japanese indie, but no, they're from Venezuela. Not having played this yet is definitely one of my biggest gaming cardinal sins alongside finishing Earthbound, and I'll get to it one day, I swear. That didn't sound convincing, did it? I do, however, love the soundtrack. These days, if you click the anime tag on Steam and just scroll, there's no telling what you're gonna get and from where, and I think that's pretty cool. That's kind of why I don't want to throw the word fake anime around with these, because a lot of them are clearly passion projects done by people who grew up with a strong anime influence in their life. No, it's way more fun to do it with something published by a major game studio, in fact, one of the biggest.
Which brings me to the last game of the day, and it's one that I've wanted to talk about for a good long while now. Let's take a step back to 2004, peak all of this, around the same time as Oni and Malice. First, I'm going to list off a couple games from the developer. Power Rangers Time Force, Crayola Scoots, Silent Hill Shattered Memories, Rocket Knight, Ghost Rider, the DMC clone, Lizzie McGuire 3, you get it. This is Sudeki, and I think about this way too much.
Oh, where to begin? Back in the Dwayne The Rock Xbox loving Johnson days, Microsoft was doing their best.
Enjoy your gaming.
Rock, that is impressive.
This is one of those cases where I don't even need to point it out, it's all over the place, but at least it was their mission statement. Climax Studios are the developer, and they began working on Sudeki here as early as 1999 with the goal of making themselves a Japanese-styled RPG, the whole shebang. Originally going to be a Dreamcast title, this swapped hands and publishers a few times until it got spotted by Microsoft and became one of their marquee attractions. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. The Xbox has notoriously been unable to attract a Japanese audience for pretty much their entire lifespan, which is also probably part of the reason that there weren't many JRPGs coming out, so they were like, sure, Climax, a British studio, you do it. Sudeki went through a ton of changes over the years. Thanks to the official Xbox magazine and their demo discs, we were able to get a glimpse of some of the early designs, looking less how to create manga and more, oh wow, this looks legit. But somehow after years of trying, presumably market research, and tons of bags of extreme corn nuts, they settled on this, which is a shame, considering how beautiful the Japanese cover of this game looks. But at least both covers featured one thing they found most important front and center: boobs. Sudeki is a mixed bag, but it's also one that has a really strong cult following. However, if you told me that the first major Xbox exclusive RPG was gonna be a mix of Dynasty Warriors and Quake, I wouldn't believe you.
You can't resist my healing kiss.
Oh god. This is the story of Tal, a young-ish soldier, Ailish, no not Billy, the brilliant and obsessive Elko, and Buki. She's vaguely furry. The four of them end up being the chosen ones and band together to save the world. It's not a particularly compelling story, but it is nearly fully voice acted.
Well, I was hoping for something a little more exciting, that's all. Perhaps a troop inspection.
Wake up, soldier!
It's not great, but it's there.
And of course, you survived when your brother didn't!
Microsoft really wanted to push this thing out there over in Japan. They even hired some pretty high-profile voice actors to dub it, but that didn't do too much considering it sold 6,200 copies. Yeah. I played the PC version though, as it eventually made its way to Steam, and it works well, although it seems to be incredibly glitchy. Anytime you run up a hill, the camera decides to just go into the earth. Also, some cutscenes are totally messed up. Where's the table? Why is that floating? What's going on? If you weren't a butt person before, Sudeki's gonna make you one. Random camera shots aside, both of the main ladies' outfits are, not subtle. Kinda like the gameplay, which is pretty underwhelming. You basically have two types of fighting, ranged and melee. Tal and Buki get in with swords and claws. Elko and Eilish can shoot dudes from distances. You've also got spells you can use, each with their own cutscene and voice line, like a less charming Grandia 2.
Flying Tensei Ken!
The melee guys have different combos that are timing based. There's only like 6 or 7 of them, but you'll have to memorize them in order to do anything. But I found it way more interesting to just play like an FPS. You can cast spells from a distance, healing an offensive, while blasting dudes away with whatever weapon you have. Be it a gun, or a staff, or a gun, or a staff. A gun and a staff. Having played a good amount of this now, I can tell that Climax were trying to appeal to as many people as possible with Sudeki, and it might have suffered from that. Combat feels shallow, and because of that, the experience is kinda mid. This applies to the art too. You have this wacky and unique visual style in the 3D models, but then you see very different anime portraits and paintings on the wall. I've brought up the Uncanny Valley a few times today, but this one really takes the cake. Unfortunately, Sudeki wasn't a finished product when it was released. Despite being pushed back several years to different consoles, similarly to Malice, Microsoft ended up pushing this one out before it was fully ready, and the game quite literally ends without any explanation or ending. There's a clear ambition here and even a lot of love in some aspects. Each character goes through multiple outfit changes. Remember having multiple outfits in a game? 2022, wow. But I can only imagine that the amount of changes they did harmed it in the long run. Nothing like your game's ending being a random poem. I think with a little more time, heck, even a delay to be an early 360 game, it could have fixed Sudeki up to be a more memorable experience. But what we ended up with is a total 6 out of 10. One that totally failed to have those important character and story moments that you expect in a JRPG. But I will never forget the way this looks. It haunts me.
So there we have it, the long lost hidden era of fake anime video games. I did a lot of research for this one. I didn't realize that this was going to be longer than my Metal Gear Survive video, but here we are. I think I got them all, but because there's just so many video games, be it like bootlegs, indies, and specifically Amiga titles, if there's something that I missed, please let me know down in the comments, because I do want to know. Probably won't play it, but I'd like to be like, hey, cool. I had a ton of fun making this video, and if there's one game to check out from it, I recommend Shogo. Shogo is really cool. You can get it on Steam. It is kind of a pain to set up, but you can figure it out with a couple of Steam community guides and like a tech person who's like 45. And hey, if you do like the content, consider tossing a couple bucks my way via like Patreon or buying one of my t-shirts on the Pixel Empire. Everything from that goes back into the channel towards paying my editors, getting new equipment and everything. So if you want to see more content, like as fast as I've been doing lately, please consider supporting one of those two things. But if not, no worries. A subscribe, like, share, or angry comment will do. I'm just here. I'm just having a good time. Anyways, I've been Austin, and catch me next time when I try to make a video that's just a little bit shorter. Just watch it be longer.
Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Blackfoot Ferret, Chris Shelton, Christopher Oliva, Darren Newton, Doug Prince, DX Buster, David Molnar, Elijah, GM Pinks, Hey Quiggles, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Kevin Zanowski, Karen Arter, Nick Irving, P-Funk, Ryan Talbert, and Shazan. Thank you all so much for your generous support. Another video in the pocket. You know, I'm trying to make it so there's not as many like part 2s to videos anymore, considering I like to just have them in one nice package, but I can't believe this is as long as it is, but here we go. I have more videos coming soon. 2 more this month, hopefully, fingers crossed. I hope you've been enjoying the video spree. I know I have. I have a lot of stuff on the horizon, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So yeah, drink some water. Wipe your butt.